Hey everybody, Joe here from the Lions Led by Donkeys podcast. If you enjoy what we do here on the show and you think it's worth your hard-earned money, you can support the show via Patreon. Just a $1 donation gets you access to bonus episodes, our Discord, and regular episodes before everybody else. If you donate at an elevated level, you get even more bonus content. A digital copy of my book, The Hooligans of Kandahar, and a sticker from our Teespring store. Our show will always be ad-free and is totally supporter-driven. We use that money to pay our bills, buy research materials that make this show possible, and support charities like the Kurdish Red Crescent, the Flint Water Fund, and the Halo Trust. Consider joining the Legion of the Old Crow today. And now back to the show.
From a book showed me.
Hello, and welcome to another lovely episode of the Lions Led by Donkeys podcast. I'm Joe, and with me again, returning champion of, 5-6 times now, Sarah of It Came From the Sea. Hello, Sarah.
I'm here.
The fans enjoy the Sarah episodes, so
I enjoy the Sarah episodes,
yeah,
so I don't really care if the fans do.
I fucking hate them. I hate them so much. We have spent hours recording podcasts together. And if you're a regular listener of the show, you've probably noticed that over the course of the last several months, a lot of our episodes have been dark, to say the least. And I thought it would be a very good idea to do one that is not so soul crushing. And Sarah actually gave me the idea to do the military career, the illustrious, heroic military career of L. Ron Hubbard.
I'm gonna be honest, when I threw that out there in an Adderall fueled haze of here's some random ideas, I really didn't think there'd be more than a paragraph or two for you to read about.
Good news, there is a lot.
Hell yeah.
All right. So there really wouldn't be if he was just some guy that did not go out and in fact found one of the largest cults in the world currently. That's what it would be. He would just be another shitbag during a time like in World War II where there had to be just so many of them because of the draft and lowering standards for officers, which is how he ended up getting in.
That we love lowering standards.
He wouldn't even be a blip on the radar. Well, with the exception of that time he attacked Mexico, but we'll get there. How much this is your idea, and this is actually, I can say with certainty that this is the first episode we've done that I can remember off the top of my head where absolutely nobody dies.
Oh yeah.
Because Scientology doesn't come until later, and that will kill some people.
We're only here for the shenanigans. We're not here for the murder.
Yeah. If only Lafayette Ronald Hubbard believed in that. I gotta say, for a guy named Lafayette,
naval name, yeah,
exactly. His dad is in the Navy. Yeah.
Okay, his dad's a fucking nerd then.
Yeah, his dad is a nerd, and from everything I can tell, a normal naval officer. But unfortunately, his son is L. Ron Hubbard.
If you're a normal naval officer, it's not saying good things about you.
No, I didn't mean that as a compliment. Or any officer for that matter. He very clearly wanted to be his dad. He actually claims a medal that his dad has, which no longer existed.
That is the weakest form of stolen valor.
Yeah, and I guess I should preface this whole thing with I don't care about stolen valor. I don't see it as this unassailable sin that people use to get free food or whatever. I don't care.
Kind of sad.
Yeah, it's nerd shit. I don't care. It is, however, very, very funny when you establish an entire cult using it as a foundation. If you do that, then yeah, I'm gonna laugh at you. If you're just some guy trying to get 10% off your Kia or whatever, I hope it works.
Yeah, good luck, man. If you're just trying to get free appetizers from Chili's on Veterans Day, fucking power to you.
Yeah, I never go. Use mine.
Yeah, you could have my expired dependent ID from when I used to be married. Keep it.
Now, we're not going to dive in a lot about the church because this all happened before then, but we do have to bring up the church because, like I was explaining to Sarah before we started recording, the reason that we know as much as we know is because the church was very, very stupid. And as anybody who's paid attention to the Church of Scientology, they know they're incredibly litigious, or at least they used to be. That's kind of died now that the internet kind of overpowers their lawyers. Come
Got
at me,
those Chinese
motherfuckers.
bots for a problem.
Come at me. Please don't. Please don't come at me. Leave me alone.
Parody.
Public use or something. But in the 80s, one of their members defected, who was also the church's biographer for LRH.
Oh.
Yeah. So they sued him for like betrayal of trust and contract or whatever, because he took a lot of those documents with him that proved everything that LRH was saying. And yes, I've been reading enough about this, about the Church of Scientology over the last 2 days. I am now calling him LRH.
It's just quicker that way. It's easier for everybody.
Yeah. Hey, look, when your first name is Lafayette, you get a nickname, all right?
Just old Laffy Hubbard over there.
But they challenged him in court, which meant that they had to prove that these documents were real, and they failed miserably. But now they're also in the public arena for people to download and stuff. Not to mention, people have read one of the main sources I'm using is a book called Barefaced Messiah. It's very, very good, and they lay it all out pretty easily. Though that is mostly about the church's establishment as a whole and onto his death. Like, I only had to use a very little bit of it because his military career, like you point out, not that long.
Right.
And so I do have to say, if you don't know anything about the church, some of this is going to fly over your head. I assume most people have some kind of bare level understanding of it. And if you don't, I will say it's exactly like delving into several thousand pages of badly written sci-fi, because he's a sci-fi author, and he is the strictest definition of pulp sci-fi that you can have is what he wrote, and not the good kind.
I own a copy of Dianetics because I found it in a used bookshop in the like occult section, and it is shit. I obviously haven't bothered to read the whole thing, but you skim through it and you're just like, wow, nobody in the church has actually read this. Much like most churches. I think
they have to. I think they passed tests on it or something.
That is just like, it is just bad sci-fi.
Right. I mean, it doesn't have like, it's supposed to be a self-help book, but it has like an erupting volcano on the cover.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of awesome.
Though, in order to talk about why the Navy is such a funny thing to make fun of in regards to LRH, we have to explain a little bit about the church and why having an obsession with the Navy as well as naval iconography is the foundation of the church. Now, most people are probably vaguely aware of the existence of something called the Sea Org, or Sea Organization. They like to call everything orgs for some reason.
Yeah. Sounds spacey. It's cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Your books would sell better if everything written in them was about something orgs.
I'm gonna have to work on that.
Yeah.
I will say one thing about L. Ron Hubbard. Dianetics has certainly sold more copies than any of my books.
You didn't start a cult or a church, and that's really where you're going wrong here.
Yet. To be fair, he was in his 50s before he started his. I got time.
You got time.
Yep.
You got time.
But effectively, the Sea Org is supposed to be the space navy that is supposed to clear the world. It is the ecclesiastical arm of the church, and I mean that in the most threatening way possible.
What does ecclesiastical actually mean?
They're the ones kind of in charge of dogma. Okay. They consider them a they're, I don't know. They certainly wouldn't call them a zealot.
Okay, but it's like the most like extreme and most dedicated part.
Yeah, they're considered legally a fraternal religious order, and they do that. They call them this legally, like they're clergy almost, because that means legally they don't have to pay them.
Because it's like a prison ship, right? Isn't that part of it?
Oh, the free winds, you mean? We'll get that.
Fuck? Okay,
we'll
never
get there.
mind.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pretend I don't know anything because apparently I don't. Let's do it.
So, at the establishment of the church, actually, I don't know if they were specifically calling it a church quite yet. It was maybe in its beginning forms. They had a whole ass navy. They had like a flotilla. They had several ships.
What?
Yeah, I think it was like 3 or 4. And that's where they existed. Like LRH was living on a boat just out of his mind on fucking pills. And they mostly bounced around like the Mediterranean, getting evicted out of ports and shit. because they were doing crimes. Like, you can't just form a navy and randomly show up places.
Did they sail from like the U.S. to the Mediterranean, or did they start in the Med and then just tool around there?
I think they started in California, as all bad things do. I haven't made fun of California a lot on this show. I need to make up for that.
Yeah, we really got to work on it.
Yeah.
I just like the thought of I know the Sea Org's been around. I didn't realize it was like maybe I did at some point. I don't know. I either didn't realize or didn't remember that it was so like it basically has lasted as long as the church has. But the thought of just like LRH, old, sweaty, full of pills, just yelling at people from a cabin as they have to sail for weeks on end to get to the Mediterranean is extremely funny to me.
And demanding that everybody call him Commodore with a hat and everything. You can see he actually
got multiple ships. It makes him a Commodore.
He did a interview with, I think, the BBC or something during this time, and I have to say, if you've never seen LRH in full pill mode, it's a sight to see. Like, for one, he looks like he chews on rocks. Like, he's like very red. His teeth are fucked. I mean, he's had a lifelong smoking problem, and it
one
of
the rock eaters from the Neverending Story.
Because he's just chewing into particularly hard fucking Valiums or something. He has a very fancy smooshed Commodore's hat, and he speaks in like an old timey theater accent. Despite the fact he is very American, he does not naturally have an accent at all. And another fun thing about this Navy is it was staffed by people who had no fucking experience on boats. So people were just getting like grievously injured because they had no idea what they were doing.
I mean, it had worked so well for him in the past, you know?
Right. The closest thing to experience came from him, who was a career-long shitbag in the Navy, and I think spent at most 3 months accumulatively on ships in the Navy. Nowadays, the Scientology Navy no longer exists. They do have one boat called the Free Winds, which I believe is like a converted old-timey luxury cruise liner from the 50s or 60s. So it's actually not as big as that sounds. But it is where they go to learn all the Xenu shit, like OT level 9 or whatever. It's for the richest, and by that I mean the dumbest members of the cult, because they've been members for years. They've paid so much money to learn all this stuff, and also it's incredibly badly maintained. And at one point was shut down for asbestos abatement. Though,
I mean, that just sounds like every cruise I've ever heard of, though.
Yeah, and since I think it's flagged out of the U.S., they actually had to take care of it rather than like flagging it out of, I don't know, Liberia like people do. And they're like, actually, it's legally allowed to be on fire.
Yeah. We're allowed to own slaves, actually. There's no laws against it.
Now, the really weird part here about the Sea Org itself is it can be fairly described as a weird religious militia that allows child semen. Because you can join...
You cannot.
Technically, they're semen. They're semen. They're child semen. This child soldiers doesn't work.
Sailors, they're just sailors. Seaman is a rank.
They're ranked seamen. Actually, that's not what they're ranked. Their lowest rank is Swamper Able Rate. So child swampers. I stand by my previous statement that the Church of Scientology supports child semen.
Let it be known that I tried. An attempt was made to walk that back, and no.
Like, you can legally be a minor and join the Sea Org. I think it requires a parental signature or something. It's pretty young. But like I said, the church considers them a fraternal or a religious order. Though you should also look up the fact that they wear over-the-top naval uniforms. Everybody has to wear. They have enlisted and officer ranks. And they're pretty rigidly enforced. Like, I saw more than one story of members of the Sea Org who have since defected, who said, like, yeah, I got thrown in like a slave camp for like a week because I didn't call someone sir once. I haven't gotten to the slave camps yet. They have a large system of slave camps.
All the best organizations have these things. I have looked up a picture of their uniforms, and the funniest shit to me is that they just look like the most uncomfortable, like, actual Navy uniforms.
They look like if you were like, I want to dress up like like I'm in the Navy for Halloween, so you get a Spirit Halloween.
Yeah, but they're using versions of the uniform that everybody in the Navy just fucking hated wearing.
I mean, I bet these guys hate wearing it too. Because like they're doing the worst fucking manual labor on Earth while dressed like, I don't know, the Waffen
They're fucking
SS.
Yeah. Jesus.
Oh, they also have a special branch. You want to guess what it's called?
What's it for? Tell me its purpose, and I'll try to guess.
I don't know.
What?
So we only know it exists due to a comment from David Miscavige, who's the current leader of the church. I cannot find
Don't
any
ask about
new.
his wife.
Don't ask about his wife. That's going to get us sued. Um, uh, but other than the fact that we know they exist in some form or another, we have no idea what they do. But since this is a church that has once literally infiltrated the government more successfully than any foreign government ever has, we can assume they do weird and probably illegal things.
I got nothing. What are they called? Something org?
The SEALs. That's right. The Sea Org has
fucking,
Navy SEALs.
They're not even trying.
And the dumbest part is that's an acronym. It stands for like sea, land, and air. So do they now also have an air force that we're not aware of?
Sea, land, and like the airwaves? Huh? Radio Sea Org?
Oh, God, that sounds terrible. Though it probably does exist.
Plays human music and just like recordings of LRH.
He has the weirdest fucking voice. I don't know how to explain it other than like this is what like Gilbert Godfrey listens for ASMR. Like it's the I don't fucking know.
Rest in peace, King.
Rest in peace, homie. I'm sorry you didn't deserve that. But the camp system is called the Rehabilitation Project Force.
Oh, sure.
They also really like the term force. But it's legally you can leave whenever you want, of course. But you know, the practice of the church is if like you quit, nobody you know, to include your family, can never associate with you ever again. But they also have the Project Rehabilitation Force, which is people who fuck up in that get sent to the worst version of that.
Did they really just call it the Rehabilitation Force? Like you failed the first one, we're just going to do it again, but harder.
Yeah, pretty much. This includes like legitimate prison cells, like pits. I've heard the word pit used more than once.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is ran by the Sea Org, but also there's like Sea Org members put in it. Yeah.
Is it all on the boat?
No. The Free Winds is for like the rich people. They don't do their weird slavery shit on the Free Winds. That's very front facing. And to join them, you have to sign a literal billion-year contract.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, of course, they explain this as like it's a show of your devotion to the church. I call it creepy. And universally, every single member of the Sea Org that has left the church says they get treated like shit. They're physically and mentally abused. They're not paid, barely fed, and they're used as labor until you die or run away. And there's weird sex rules too. You cannot have sex
at all.
You can get married, but then you have to leave the Sea Org. So.
Oh, but this is just for the Sea Org. This isn't all of Scientology. Yeah. Okay, so Sea Org is just like their little incel battalion.
Yeah, but there is some pretty strict rules about premarital sex within the church anyway.
I believe that, yeah.
Of course, if you're famous, these rules don't apply. Look, case in point, all of the members of the church being got for sexual assault and that the church tried to cover up. Yeah. Now,
yay.
They're just trying to make themselves more mainstream by covering up sex criminals. They thought that was the line they had to cross in order to be accepted.
They learned it from watching you, Harvey Weinstein.
Just David Miscavige looking at the Pope like, I thought you said this would get us across the line.
Oh, God.
Now, as weird and kind of funny as a vet bro starting a cult that forces people to cosplay as the Space Navy is.
I mean, BRC is so close to that already.
They're very close, yeah. It's somehow worse because at least, like, even though LRH is a fraud and a horrible person, dead or otherwise, at least he couched his in, like, self-help, even if it didn't work and was incredibly abusive. Like, the Black Rifle Coffee is like, we just like saying slurs and drinking overpriced coffee.
Yeah.
It's like, what if we opened a Starbucks in Rhodesia? That is Black Rifle Coffee. But it should be known that L. Ron Hubbard was in the Navy. He was a commissioned officer, and he did serve during World War II. I will not say he fought in World War II because he didn't. He was, in fact, there.
That's
Um,
more than any of us can say, really.
yeah, I mean, true. I mean, I don't know. Fetal me may have not existed yet, but Now, however, what that service entails depends entirely who you ask. If you ask the Church of Scientology, which they will not answer your emails, I have tried. L. Ron Hubbard is a goddamn war hero whose true service is being suppressed by the United States government because of, well, two reasons. They decide on which at different times, either religious persecution or because he worked so intensely with the Office of Special Naval Operations they could never reveal what he did.
We found out that they like immediately kidnapped a bunch of Nazis right after World War II. Like they couldn't keep that secret. There's no way they're keeping like LRH's bullshit secret.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Of all of the things that we've learned, that like no, like there's one guy, like that church in Ethiopia that believes that they have like the Ark of the Covenant. They have one like junior grade lieutenant sit on a box with LRH's original DD-214 on it, and he is blinded, so he cannot read it. And every 10 years, they have to swap out with a new fucking Naval Academy grad.
Well, no, it's actually every 6 years because they hire your tenure out. But fresh blood and all that.
Now, if you ask the U.S. Navy, on the other hand, Hubbard had a short, very eventful career of him being a complete and total fuck up, all while faking a series of illnesses and possibly a terrorist attack to get out of work and then bilk the VA for money. And I really hate to say that because that's the one redeeming quality that he has, is that he did try to cheat the VA.
At any other point in history, go for it. World War II, kind of the one time you probably should have done your job. It's the one time. It's the one time where we were fighting Nazis. You probably should have done your job the one time.
Yeah. And also, I couldn't even tell you really what his job was because he got fired from so many of them. The Navy was like, we just have to find something to use this officer for.
Did he enter as an officer? Did he go like...
Yes.
Okay.
So this podcast ventures to find what story is the right one. The Navy's is the right one. And this is the only time I ever get to say that the U.S. Navy was right. You got me. L. Ron Hubbard got me to admit the Navy was right about something. Hubbard, and this may surprise you, Sarah, and people listening, is something of a constant pathological liar about everything to do with his entire life. Like his history, any point of his life, you can probably find a point that he lied about it. And at this point, we really only know what really happened due to the extensive paperwork the military keeps on anybody who's ever had the misfortune of walking into one of their offices. Though the church did try really hard to also fabricate that, and that's where the court comes in later. Now, let's tell the church's side of the story first, because I cannot explain to you just how funny it is. Now, this is from the church's own website. Quote, on his return from Helena, Montana in September 1927, he joined the Montana National Guard. This is true. He did join the Montana National Guard.
He's from Montana?
He ended up there. His dad was in the Navy and then did government work and bounced around a lot. And at this part of his life, he tries to make himself sound like some Indiana Jones level adventurer for some reason, despite the fact he is 16 years old. And in church history, this is where he claims he's some kind of Blackfoot Native American tribe blood brother or some insane shit.
Do.
Yeah, it's
just why.
He does this a lot.
Never worked for any white person in history. Stop trying.
He could run for president. Now, but he was only 16 when he joined the National Guard. But that, it was 1927. You could just be like, yeah, I'm 18. They're like, cool.
Right.
What are they going to do? Fucking reference your paperwork with something else? And this is telling because he does look to be about 9 years old in the pictures that I've seen. He's not one of those people that he might be 16, but he looks to be about 19. Absolutely not. He looks every bit of 10. Now, the only thing the church says during this time is, quote, he joins the 163rd Infantry, distinguishes himself as a marksman, and edits the high school newspaper.
All equally important things.
I can't say if he did or didn't do any of this, though I should point out in his official records, which if I don't know if things have changed since then. If you've had prior service, all that shit rolls over onto your records. You don't have separate military records for all of the different, that all gets compiled. There's nothing in there about ever being given any award by the Montana National Guard.
No, like he was a child, and it was during like peacetime. What award would he have gotten?
Some kind of marksmanship badge, since that's the only thing he
but
likes
that's
to point
like-
out that he did there.
But even that is like they hand those to you at boot camp. I imagine they've
Yeah, but they're
always
still on your
been
record.
doing that. Yeah, that's true.
But he leaves the Guard pretty soon after joining it, and then joins the Marine Reserves in 1930 when he's 19. And it's part of like this training program because he's attending George Washington University for various different brainy shit. And it wasn't like JRTC or ROTC or anything like that. I think this is before then. But it's a training unit attached to his college. Also, he never graduates that college, though the church insists that he did.
Working class hero, LRH.
Also, it begs the question how the fuck he got a commission in the Navy.
Yeah, right?
Because he joins before World War II. But nobody, like, he never graduated from any college anybody's ever been able to find.
Is that not a requirement at the time?
Maybe he got a pass because his dad was an officer. That's the only thing I could think
Honestly,
of.
Yeah, I could
the
see
Navy
that.
notes in his record that he was a college dropout.
The Navy loves it some nepotism too, though.
Yeah, 100%, especially back then. That shit
yeah.
ran on nepotism. It's baked right in. The church's website says absolutely nothing about his time in the Marine Reserve, and I might know why. He joined the reserves for only 1 year, though in his personal interviews, he claimed that he was promoted to the rank of first sergeant. Now, for people who are unaware, he is 19 years old, and this is a rank that can normally take people 20 years to attain.
Yeah,
didn't happen.
In
Probably
the book, not.
Yeah, I'm gonna shake the magic 8 ball here and say unlikely. In the book Barefaced Messiah, and Hubbard insists that he was giving glowing reviews during his 1 year of service for, quote, military efficiency, obedience, and sobriety. Which, to be clear, in peacetime Marine Reserve, I could see as someone be like, congratulations, you're sober.
Yeah. You didn't get into an alcohol-related incident this year.
You are the one. I don't even believe that, because 1 year later, he was given an honorable discharge with a note on his paperwork that said, quote, not to be re-enlisted. And nobody has any idea why.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Now, like, you can get things like in modern day stuff. Like, for instance, if I was to re-enlist, I would have a different code on my paperwork because I signed a declination of continued service statement when they were trying to give me orders to Germany. I just didn't want to go. So that bars me from re-enlistment while I'm in and changes my re-enlistment code. However, it does not bar me from rejoining.
Yeah.
He did something that barred him from joining the Marine Reserve.
But wasn't bad enough that they like specified it or like kept him from joining anywhere else. They were just like, we don't want him.
Yeah, and it was
Anybody
still
else
honorable.
can take him. Yeah, exactly. So like, what the fuck?
Honestly, after listening to the way LRH talks about himself and how he writes, I think they're just like, look, he didn't necessarily do anything to get this honorable discharge, but someone get this fucking nerd away from us.
We just don't want to fucking deal with him anymore.
Now, I'm pointing at his pre-naval service now because in the grand scheme of things, it's considered so important that nobody ever really talks about it. The church barely even mentions it. It doesn't even, like, you can tell that it's considered unimportant because the church hardly lies about it. In comparison to his naval career, it's not nearly as funny. Hubbard joins the Navy in the summer of 1941 and is commissioned as a lieutenant, junior grade, in the Naval Reserve. And he was actually in the Naval Reserve his whole career. Because if you listen to the date, that's right before shit's about to go sideways in the world. And a whole lot of people in the Naval Reserve are going to find themselves in the active duty Navy, which includes him. And the funny thing is back then, I don't know if they still do this or not. Like whenever he had to sign his paperwork or whatever, he'd like lieutenant, junior grade. And then there was like a series of numbers after it, numbers and letters that denoted what his job was and branch. And in court later, someone would point to the series of numbers and say, see, that means intelligence branch. He was in the Office of Naval Intelligence. And like someone points out, like, that means Naval Reserve.
No, it doesn't mean he was an intel. It means he was barely in the Navy.
See, the thing is, there is for every good lie, right? There's a crumb of truth. And there is truth here. He was in the Office of Naval Intelligence for about 5 months.
How?
So He was commissioned, and the church points out that he was assigned to the Office of Naval Intelligence, at which point he was then seconded to the U.S. Hydrographic Office.
Okay.
The church then says he spent 5 months on a voyage that covered 1,500 miles through the Puget Sound into Alaska, where, of course, because he always likes to see himself as an adventurer and a discoverer and Indiana Jones and shit, he became best friends with the Aleutian natives. Because of course he did. LRH never tells a story where every native person fawns over him like white Jesus, right?
Oh no.
But the thing is, like, that also is like he did such a good job that he was awarded by the Bureau of Marine Inspection and Navigation the Masters of Steam and Motor Vessels license. That's literally just an operator's license for a boat.
Yeah, I would say that's not an award.
No, it's not. No, he went to school for it.
Yeah. Fuck.
Now, we'll get to what he was really doing during those 5 months, but I will say none of that happened. He's then dispatched to Australia as World War II starts, where he, quote, coordinates relief for the beleaguered forces under General Douglas MacArthur. And I'm going to assume here that the church means fighting in the Philippines, or the Bataan Peninsula at this time. It doesn't actually say what was going on there because, you know, if it doesn't involve him directly, it's unimportant.
Yeah, and like, what is it? So he was like MWR coordinator?
Less than that. So
just organized beer runs.
So this is still according to the church. He then goes, according to them, became a naval instructor and chief navigation officer and is elected to the U.S. Naval School of Military Government at Princeton University. The church also points out that he was wounded. At this point, this is the first time. There's a second time he is wounded, according to the church, in the Atlantic. Where exactly they took place and how changes. I mean, even Hubbard has changed his own story. This is a pretty brief summary of the naval career that would literally go on to influence and found the very beginnings of their church. And it's very abbreviated. It did not used to be that way. For very good reason, they had to abbreviate it. And remember, fleet of cult ships is involved here at one point. And these wounds that he suffered, whatever they might be, though they claim that it was shrapnel, he claims he was shot, but it always goes no. And either they say outside of Java, and then vaguely the Atlantic at some point. But all of his medical records, they come back to saying he was blinded, quote, blinded and crippled. And he used Dianetics to recover from these wounds, which is yes, is how he sells it. Sure, cool. You use self-help to get over a bullet wound. I'd really like to see how you did. It's like, oh God, I have a sucking chest wound. Quick, think positive thoughts.
Here, just read Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Just cramming chicken soup for the dog lover's soul into someone's bloody stump.
That'll do it.
Nailed it. As we're about to go over, these vary wildly from his real record, and the reason that's, according to the church, that these are fakes, as is being used for his extensive operations within the Office of Naval Intelligence, or also religious persecution, whichever. Hubbard's story changed a ton when he was alive, and at the various different stories that he told really do not add up. But at various points, he was fighting in the Pacific while taking command of a corvette in the Atlantic. I really like to believe, since he's lying so much, this is just literally a Chevy Corvette.
just got one of those like fucking off-base loans.
Just flipping shitties in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in his sports car. In the official biography published by the church, he was in command of an entire squadron of British ships somehow. I don't know how to tell them that that's not how the military works.
They're not just gonna. All right, you just borrowed an entire squadron.
Yeah, just give me your navy real quick. Yeah, the British, very famous for liking American military officers at this period of time. Hubbard names one of these corvettes that he's supposedly in command of, the Mist. Hold on to that name for later, because it actually gets funny of where he actually got that name from.
That is not the way the U.S. names vessels, but go on.
No, also there's never a corvette named that in either country they checked. Though somehow he was wounded on this ship in the Atlantic, according to an interview by him in the 50s. Now, please don't consider this an exhaustive study of his lies, because that's a whole podcast series into it's like that's their version of the Lines Led by Donkeys, except this is about LRH history. I'm only talking about the ones that we know specifically got caught up in court drama and therefore easily debunkable. Now
Lions
let's
led by
get to
Sea Org. There we go.
now let's get to his real record, because holy shit. For starters, he never worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence or the Hydrographic Office. He was assigned there. He was assigned to the Naval Intelligence Office for 5 months in upstate New York for training.
So just in TRADOC.
Yeah. I mean, they wanted to make him an intelligence officer. He was just so bad at it, they couldn't.
He failed out of TRADOC.
He didn't fail out of TRADOC. However, he failed himself out of a whole branch of the Navy.
Excellent.
So after he graduated, in this 5-month period is where they have him playing Indiana Jones out in Alaska. He was in a classroom in upstate New York. Afterwards, he was sent to Australia. And he did send supplies to MacArthur and U.S. forces on Bataan. Small problem, though. That wasn't his fucking job, and nor was he allowed to do that.
What?
So, yeah. Instead, he ordered a blockade runner that was called the Don Isidro, who was on another mission altogether. He was like a liaison for the intelligence attaché of the U.S. Navy to Australia. He was an aide. And he then shanghaied a ship that was on a completely different mission and then simply told it to go to Bataan under the auspices of the authority of his boss, which I should point out was 3,000 miles away from where it was supposed to be.
Yeah. What the fuck? What supplies did he have on board?
I don't know.
Was he on the vessel or did he just spend the vessel?
He was in Australia. I think he was in Brisbane.
What the fuck?
This got him immediately fired because, his supervisor, the intelligence attaché, then cabled to Washington, D.C., and this is a direct quote from the cable. Quote, by assuming unauthorized authority and attempting to perform duties which he has no qualifications, he became the source of much trouble. This officer is not satisfactory for independent duty assignment. He is garrulous and tries to give the impressions of his own importance. He also seems to think he has an unusual ability in every line. These characteristics indicate that he will require close supervision for satisfactory performance in any intelligence duty.
Oh my god.
He stole a whole ship.
That is
indirectly
scathing too. They're describing him the way you might describe a character from a mid-aught sitcom. Just he thinks they're good at everything.
And tellingly, if this wasn't World War II, this would get him sent to prison. For sure.
It is wild that in the mid, it's worse that it happened in World War II, but they also have fewer options because it's fucking World War II.
That speaks to his entire career. Like in Bald-Faced Messiah and this other resource I use called Ron the War Hero. Great title, honestly. It really, everything boils down to he was only still in the Navy because they fucking had to.
Oh my god! But it sounds like he's just a detriment more than anything, though. Too.
100%.
So,
he never did a single good thing while he was in the Navy. Yeah.
This is why you have to This is why you have to write stuff down when people are fuck ups. It's not because you hate them. It's because when you need to kick LRH out of the Navy, you need to have a paper record.
The LRH going to his commander, just exasperated. There's no fucking paper trail for this time. He stole a whole boat.
Yeah. Nobody wrote a bad performance chip. We can't do anything.
Now, his attempt to just, take command of an entire theater of operations became so well known and joked about within the Navy that Hubbard himself mentioned it in his book. Though I don't think that he understood what was happening, because they were laughing at him and his story. Now, in Ron the War Hero, he says, quote, for the next 2 or 3 years, I'd run into officers and they say, Hubbard, are you the Hubbard that was in Australia? And I would say, yes. And they would say, oh, kind of horrified. Like they didn't know whether it was quite a good idea to talk to me or not, Terrible man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also be like,
shit.
Are you the same guy with the boat thing? Now, depending on which LRH you talk to, this either happened or didn't happen. And in another version of the story, that he was an anti-aircraft gunnery commander, which he never was, who was tasked with shooting down Japanese planes that got close to Brisbane and was armed only with a Thompson submachine gun.
But he was also an officer.
Yes. Also, you don't shoot down planes with a fucking Thompson. That's not what that's for. Don't. Yeah, LRH certainly could. He'd use his mind bullets.
That's right.
Now, after this, he was kicked out of the entire Pacific Theater. He was sent over to the cable censor office in New York and was, for reasons nobody is quite sure of why, promoted. This is the last time he'd be promoted. Now, this is also officially his end of his time in the Naval Intelligence Branch, becoming a deck officer. This is, because, like they said, this guy can't do intelligence duties. He's a lunatic. Stashed in the office building, he got pissed and requested to be put on a ship. Any ship, preferably in active combat. Instead, he was put on the MV Mist, which is a fishing trawler retrofitted for military service. And it was then renamed the YP-422, the YP being Yard Patrol, because they were literally only used to put around the outside of naval yards for security. And he was in Massachusetts. He would not go near a war.
Do you believe that he really did even ask to go to war? Or is that something
probably.
that he maybe like talked up after the fact?
I fully believe that he was like, those guys just don't know what they had going for them. I would be the best goddamn gunnery or whatever kind of officer when facing down the Japanese Navy or whatever, because he thinks he's the best at everything.
Right, that's true. He does earnestly believe that about himself.
That's the only thing I do believe about him when he says that he believes he could do this. I'm like, I truly do believe that you believe that.
All right. Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
He got fired in a month. Yeah. He was on that ship for a month. He couldn't do yard patrol for a month. And he was, I believe, he was in command of the boat because it's a fishing trawler. Like, whatever, put the fucking lieutenant in charge. Nobody cares. And he got fired. In October, he was sent back to New York again. And the vice chief of naval operations for the entire United States Navy remarked that Hubbard was, quote, not temperamentally fit for independent command.
Damn.
Imagine being such a fuck up, like the third guy in charge of the entire Navy in the middle of World War II is like, yeah, I know Hubbard.
Yeah, right. You don't want them to know your name.
Yeah. However, kind of like we pointed out, it's World War II, and the Navy's very, very desperate. And within another month, he was kicked over to a submarine chasing training center in Florida and learned how to command a anti-submarine ship over the course of 10 whole days of training. At which point he was kicked over to Oregon and given the command of the USS PC-815, which was a sub chaser. Now, it's probably some people might be wondering, why the fuck was he stationed in Oregon? The reason is that there actually had been Japanese submarines that surfaced just outside of Oregon. One specifically in June of 1942, which is right before this. A Japanese submarine under the command of Tagami Meiji attacked Fort Stevens, Oregon, and did the dastardly duty of shelling the local baseball field.
I would still be like, if you're the people of like Astoria, Oregon, you'd be pretty freaked out.
Yeah, 100%. It was all to like massage away their fears. Like, look, we have the best boats in the Navy to protect you in command of this.
We sent you our finest ginger.
We sent you the finest officer we found in an office who was unemployed.
Yeah, we don't want this one anywhere near anything important. That's why we're giving him to you.
That's why they stationed him in Astoria, Oregon.
Yeah.
The Goonies hadn't quite set up shop there, so they didn't have to worry. That hadn't happened yet, so there's nothing to lose.
He was going to find that pirate treasure, right?
I mean, quite honestly, that is what he believed he was telling people that he was doing in the cult Navy, is that they were going around looking for sunken treasure. Yeah. So, yeah, he is the original Goonie. Now, in May of 1943, Hubbard, the commanding officer, and his crew were about 12 miles off the shore of Cape Lookout, Oregon, when Hubbard's sonar detected something that resembled a submarine. He looked at it, said, "Yep," and began a riveting 2-day-long battle outside of Cape Lookout, which, surprisingly, the Battle of Cape Lookout is not taught in schools for some reason. It was a 2-day-long battle where Hubbard went toe-to-toe with 2 Japanese submarines firing off 35 depth charges, which, remind you, all of the depth charges he had on board. And when he ran out of that, he began firing cannon rounds when he swore that the subs had surfaced. Eventually, this battle was joined by Coast Guard ships, other Navy sub chasers, an observation blimp, which is just fun.
Okay, well, that person clearly was just having a good time.
That guy, that's the true winner of World War II, is the guy who got stationed to a blimp in Astoria, Oregon.
We need to bring
Like,
back
yeah,
the
I'm a
blimp
World War
corps.
II veteran. I'm a
Yeah,
blimp.
fuck the
I'm from the
Space Force. We don't need that. We need the blimp corps.
yeah. Bring back the blimpies. That's they call themselves. I don't know.
Is that what they call themselves?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
All right.
Sticking with it. Yeah, and the sandwich shop stole their valor. Stealing blimp valor is actually the only legitimate kind of stolen valor.
Yeah, that's the only one that should still be illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Hubbard was the first officer on scene, so he was given command over this entire operation. Now the other ships, for some reason, didn't see anything, and nobody else fired another shot. But it was only Hubbard that was just like blasting wildly, like he was in a John Woo film. And eventually they left the area, blimp included. Hubbard was sure that they sank a submarine. He swore they saw an oil slick on the water. Nobody else saw it. And the periscope that they were firing deck guns at, one of the other ships were like, "That's a log. That's a floating log, Ron. You're shooting at a log."
I mean,
because
I was really worried this was going to end with like a very dead whale.
I mean, that would actually give him more credit because at least he saw something alive. So, and funny enough, even in his own report, he notes that they shot at the periscope and then it disappeared and then came back, which is him describing how a log goes under the water and then comes back.
Right. If you were shooting at an enemy periscope, you know what it wouldn't do? Return.
Bob up and down like a piece of wood. So this was a magnetic deposit. Yeah. Everybody knew about this other than Hubbard, apparently. It was
like,
pretty.
Didn't read the fucking briefs or whatever.
Yeah. It was a pretty well-known deposit of material that would cause the sonar to go wild whenever you were near it.
Right.
And he either didn't care enough or wanted. I mean, he always wanted to be a war hero.
Right. Yeah.
Because he made himself one in his own made-up church. But everybody else knew about it. That's why they showed up like, "Oh, we're fucking here. God damn it, Ron."
I'm just glad it wasn't a whale. I feel like this is a win for me and cetaceans everywhere.
And we do have his report, which I have to say is written exactly like one of his books. Here's some excerpts I found funny. Quote, "The first contact is very good. The target is moving left and away. The bearing was clear. The night was moonlit and the sea was flat calm," which is not how you fill out an incident
you didn't
report.
need to include that.
At one point, he describes the second day of fighting as, quote, "dawn breaking over a glassy sea." Quote, "All guns are now manned with great attention, and it was supposed that the sub was trying to surface. Everybody was very calm. Gunners were joking about who would get in the first shot."
I bet they were.
Yeah, like...
I'm sure they were very calm.
They're like, "The lieutenant's fucking stupid, isn't he?"
Yeah.
"Hey, man, I think we're shooting at a log."
Yeah, who's going to have to shoot at this fucking log first?
Now, he ends his report with, quote, "This vessel wishes no credit for itself. It was built to hunt submarines. Its people were trained to hunt submarines, although exceeding its orders originally by attacking at the first contact. This vessel feels that it's done its job, at which point it's been attended and stands ready to do it again." I love that it has morphed into he is writing at the perspective of the ship.
Yeah, what the fuck? Also, I love the acknowledgement that, like, yes, we broke the rules. Yes, we did exactly what we were told not to do, but we would do it again.
Now, Sarah, what if I told you this is not be the last time that he broke a lot of rules and attacked something that wasn't there?
I would just be glad that he fulfilled his promise.
Now, I will say that this imaginary naval battle probably wouldn't have hurt him. This actually happened a lot. This is not the first time, and during the show, I've had to point out that someone was bombing a magnetic deposit or something. This kind of thing happened frequently as jumpy people who thought that every inch of the sea was clogged full of Japanese submarines were relying on technology that was very new and didn't have all the kinks ironed out quite yet.
Right.
But then he bombed Mexico. That
All
got
of
him in
Mexico?
trouble. Oh, well, a part of Mexico. I mean, he's riding a very small, barely armed ship. Thank God he couldn't do two. If you gave this motherfucker a battleship,
was he still in the same ship or like same similar size?
Yes, same ship. So the 815.
Yeah, okay.
You can tell it's inconsequential because the Navy didn't even give it a name. They numbered that son of a bitch. So in June, Hubbard, still in command, had taken the 815 off the coast of San Diego to take part in some naval exercises. When, on the return back to port, he decided it'd be a very good idea to take a slight detour for some unapproved and unplanned gunnery practice, because he had noted that the crew hadn't shot very often. I guess they hadn't seen any more logs.
I just like, how do they keep putting him in charge of things? Right? Like, I know they're desperate, but really just have an unlisted person do this.
At this point, yeah, just fire him. He has a second command who can't be any worse.
Literally cannot be. I mean, I guess could be worse, but
a literal corpse would do less damage.
Very unlikely.
Yeah. Now, he ordered them to head for the nearby Coronado Islands to be used as a target for gunnery practice. The Coronado Islands are part of Mexico. Yeah. Hubbard apparently did not know this and did not bother to check any fucking maps. Now, these islands were normally uninhabited in modern times, but as Mexico was as worried about Japanese subs because they're an ally of the United States, it had been turned into a duty station for Mexican Marines and a small force of other naval personnel. So Hubbard ordered the ship to begin firing, which it did have like a small anti-submarine cannon. So thankfully, he did, like I said, he doesn't have a battleship out there or anything.
Yeah.
He also had the crew test out their small arms, so machine guns, rifles, pistols too.
But they're all just firing them into an island.
Yes, blindly.
So they're not aiming at anything that is smaller than an island.
Yeah, they're doing the amount of marksmanship that L. Ron Hubbard was qualified to obtain, which was shelling an island.
Medal, okay? He earned that.
And actually, he didn't hit the island all that well either. The sound of it definitely freaked out the Mexican Marines who were there, who suddenly thought they found themselves in the middle of World War II. Like, holy fuck, it's real. This went on for like 3 hours. After this, the Mexican government kindly asked the United States, yo, what the fuck? And Hubbard was fired. Though as he was about to be punished, he checked himself into the sick bay where he faked various different illnesses for 2 months. And this would not be the last time he did this. And we know that he's faking because he admitted so.
Nice.
After there's a period of his life where he wrote something called Affirmations. Now, he didn't say that he wrote this. The church has all but admitted that he wrote it. It is effectively an early form of Dianetics self-help.
Okay.
A confessional. He was reinventing confessions, which is a lot of what church belief is. Like, they do auditing, which is effectively confessions as well, but much more punitive. Oh, it's weird. So he said, quote, your stomach trouble you use as an excuse to get out of the Navy from punishing you. So yeah, he admitted he was faking it. Though he did eventually have an ulcer, like some kind of peptic ulcer of some kind. So he did have some stomach problems. But he's in the hospital for months. But still, the Navy couldn't get rid of him. Remember, they needed officers, even one that fucking sucked. So they stuck him. Just stop giving him jobs. Just put him in New York. He can't hurt anything there. I mean, he eventually got put on the USS Algol, which was a cargo ship, like a cargo landing ship. Doesn't have any guns. Can't bomb Mexico again. He's not in complete control. Fine. And this is actually where he did the best in his career, though even his commander noted, on top of giving him a good review, they said, quote, he's very temperamental and often has his feelings hurt. Which I don't know how often that has to happen for that to end up in your fucking evaluation.
I worked with a few people where like I would have written that in an evaluation for him.
And outside of like being a subordinate of a subordinate of a subordinate, far down a chain of command where he couldn't, his duties are very, very finite. He couldn't fuck them up. He couldn't accidentally bomb things or start wars with Poseidon. He was fine. And then there's a very, very weird incident that happened immediately after this. While the ship was in mooring in San Pedro, California, he ran to his commander and reported that he had discovered an act of sabotage. He had discovered a firebomb, which had been made out of a Coke bottle, which were made out of glass back then, full of diesel with a wick in it. So he found a Molotov cocktail. Now, he found this, and then within a few hours of investigation, the commander immediately ordered him off the ship.
Did he also make the firebomb?
He almost certainly did. Yeah. Trying to make
himself
look like a hero.
To find the sabotage when you're doing the sabotage.
Right. It's like that fire. There was a story from a few years ago where a seasonal wildland firefighter started starting wildfires so he'd get more work. So yeah, He's that. Now it is true he did go to Princeton. However, it was after this. This is like he didn't get demoted or anything for this. So I think what happened is his commander found a way to get rid of him as fast as possible without
Right.
having to submit paperwork, and that was getting him into that military government course in Princeton because it immediately got him off the fucking ship and he never returned.
Yeah, right.
Now, I should point out that he was not, in fact, a student of Princeton University. This is a military class that simply took place in Princeton. Also, he failed it.
He failed out of like military night school.
Yeah. Now, the church likes to claim that he graduated from Princeton, but he went to a military school hosted by Princeton and failed. At which point, he was sent back to California, where he checked himself back into the sick bay, complaining about more stomach pains. He had an ulcer, but he stayed in this hospital for the rest of the war.
How long was that? Wait, when did he get into the hospital?
I want to say this was around a year.
So he spent he would have spent like all told like 18 months of his military career just in the hospital.
Significantly more time than he spent on a boat in the Navy. Yeah. Like they would get rid of him and then he'd come back like within hours. Just like symptoms are worse. Oh, now I can't see. We'll talk about his blindness a bit too, because he claims blindness an awful lot.
From all the jerking it.
Yeah. His mom said it'd make his palms hairy. And it always happened. Like he would say that his symptoms were getting worse, and they're like, "We're going to put you on this ship." It's like, "Oh, my tummy."
To be fair,
I mean, honestly, it's kind of incredible that wouldn't work in today's military. Like, "Oh, I don't feel good." Like, we don't care. Like, oh,
I mean,
okay.
You could probably try to figure it out, but you would have to be really, really willing to like basically just be treated like a fucking asshole.
Yeah, and I'm sure he was. It's just, and I'm not to say that like, oh, in today's military. I just mean it's shocking that they let him get away with that in the middle of World War II. Like, no, fuck you, get back on a boat.
Right? Yeah. At some point, it's just going to be dereliction of duty or missing a movement.
Yeah, and most people consider this like a very long string of dereliction. Though I think what benefited him is that he had a long track record of being a fucking terrible officer. So when he was assigned to a boat, and people like, who is this Lieutenant Hubbard? And they see his record, like, he can stay in the hospital. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Now, the church notes that he was in this hospital for the last year to several months because of a war wound that he suffered in the Pacific. So apparently the Japanese shot him with an ulcer cannon. I don't know. I don't fucking know. He eventually resigned his commission.
Headache cannon.
He had Havana syndrome.
Yeah.
Now, he eventually resigned his commission in 1950. And the church claims that this is because the Navy was going to steal all of his research. I don't know what research. Because remember, they also believe that he was in the Office of Naval. Well, they don't believe. They say he was in the Office of Naval Intelligence. He was doing research about bioelectricity, all sorts of shit.
The ulcer.
And the ulcer, yeah. He spent the rest of his time between this and starting Scientology and a few other things. He got really into the occult after this as well.
Yeah,
so this is before. He was with Aleister Crowley and shit.
Yeah, there's a whole orgy that went on.
Yeah, they attempted to summon what the moon demon goddess or some shit. It was a sex cult, and he stole someone's girlfriend.
Yeah.
It's honestly a very funny story, but we're not the podcast for it. He spent the time between that and getting out of the Navy trying to bilk the Navy for more money. He was claiming that he was blind and suffering from horrible racking stomach pain in order to get his disability rate bumped up. And he was originally given a 10% rating for the ulcer, which sounds accurate. That sounds like what the Navy would give you, like, we'll give you 10% to fuck off, especially in regards to ulcers or something. Now, this is what Hubbard wrote about his time, and this is from Ron the War Hero. Quote, blinded and injured optic nerves and lame with physical injuries to the hip and back at the end of World War II, I faced an almost non-existent future. My service record states this officer has no neurotic or psychotic tendencies of any kind whatsoever, but it also states permanent disability, permanently disabled physically, which, yes, it would say that because is a 10% disability rating, which means legally you are physically disabled.
You get that note for a 0% disability rating.
Well, specifically, the church points to the fact that the VA rates him as permanently physically disabled.
Right.
because that's the point of a VA rating. They give you a
Right.
disability, and of course we know this. They give you a disability rating because it is non-fixable, ergo permanent. Not because you are physically not able to get out of your bed forever. They gave
Yeah.
he is physically disabled due to ulcers.
Like one of my ratings is for tinnitus.
Yeah, I think I have that one
I
too.
am not like impaired because I have tinnitus. I just get ringing in my ears.
Right. And your paperwork would say if you stubbed your toe really bad and then they like couldn't fix it, you're physically and permanently disabled because they can't fix it. This is something
Yeah.
that no matter what they do, it will not go away. Therefore, you're permanently disabled. That's just the language that they use on these things. So he used this later as evidence saying like, look, they said I was permanently disabled and I fixed myself using my Dianetic skills or whatever.
You know,
Which, yeah, he got 10%.
might be better than some VAs though.
Yeah, maybe. Now, eventually, years later, a guy named Jerry Armstrong, who was a member of the church and was the church's chosen biographer for him, was researching Hubbard's history, specifically his military history, amongst so many other things that he lied about. I was like, wow, this all seems like bullshit to me. And he went to the church and said, like, some of these things don't add up between the
Right.
records that you're giving me and his notes. Because like what Hubbard said and what the church say don't even match up because he lied so often. The church long since stopped giving up trying to make the two match.
It really
So
makes
like,
you wonder like how they chose Jerry Armstrong when like they didn't need somebody who was good at writing biographies. They needed somebody who like implicitly understood the bullshit.
right. I think it was one of those guys that's like I've there was a period of my life where I was really into Scientology, not like believing in it, but like learning about it because it's
How much
very
money
interesting
did
to
you give
me.
to Zeno?
Hey, I could levitate now, just I can't show you for some reason. Me and Tom Cruise are on the same spaceship. But like, how the fuck this got so popular? Because it's obviously ridiculous, right? I mean,
Right,
admittedly,
yeah.
it's not any more ridiculous than any other religion, in my opinion. The just main difference is we watched it be born, so it's inherently weird.
It is a little bit more predatory in like how
Oh,
it
of
treats its
course,
members. But yeah,
yeah,
fundamentally, right? Like the belief
yeah,
structure is not like a weirder belief structure than other religions.
yeah. A space god throwing nukes around is no different than like the burning bush and shit. And
Yeah.
if people could just go to a church and not be preyed upon for money and have like horrible disconnection policies, and I'd say whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's kind of like when we talked a long, long time ago during our episode about the weird Mormon militias that like that line was crossed. They're very militant and dangerous. So it's like, yeah, we can make fun of them. But like a lot of people point out that like, yeah, of course I believed in all this until like this happened. And for a lot of like the very well off people, it was like learning about the Xenu shit. And they're like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Or for other people, it was like learning more about L. Ron Hubbard and like, this guy's a fucking idiot pillhead. And at this point, he's still alive. Like Hubbard's not dead yet when this happened.
Oh,
Yeah. He dies a few years later, and he does not attend court. He during the later part of his life, even the church he wasn't even involved in it.
right.
He was living as like despite the fact he was fantastically wealthy from the church, he was living a life as a weird drifter, like ultra paranoid, and off his fucking tits on pills. So like,
Yeah.
he didn't have a lot to do with the day to day running of this shit.
No, wasn't one of his things that he just like didn't want to be alone? And so he would constantly just like show up to prominent church members' houses and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna like stay here for a month, entertain me."
Fucking hot couch, L. Ron Hubbard.
Everybody has to call around like, "Who's got L. Ron Hubbard this weekend?"
But yeah, this was this Jerry Armstrong guy's like, what the fuck are we doing here moment. It's like these, especially because like a lot of the military records were they're pretty obviously lies. I mean, his own
Right.
other interviews that he was watching or books he wrote, because he still was writing during all of this as well, just churning out sci-fi the way only pulp authors can. Which I one of the few things I respect about him is his output is incredible. I guess the pills help. I don't know. I'm not there.
It probably helped.
Yeah, I write one book a year. I could probably up that up to like 3 if I had uncut meth like he did.
I'm not until you try it.
Yeah. Anyway, watches like that reminds me. I think it was like in Living Color or something else. SNL, one of those skit comedy things, had a pre-workout that was just like, or was a dietary method, and it was just meth.
That is no, but that's like a thing that people at like pharmaceutical companies have totally sold diet pills that were just amphetamines.
Yeah, they got banned after a lot of people's hearts exploded.
Yeah.
I think like fen was one of them. I remember that being a
Fen
big
was
deal
one
when I
of
was a
them.
kid. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
that,
one.
that took out so many fucking people's bad hearts. Good God.
Even the one, yeah. Anyways, that's a separate thing entirely.
But this was the come to Jesus moment for old Armstrong here, and he went to like his church head because he was still a believer, and he was like, "What should I do here?" And he
Right.
immediately got fucking thrown out of the church.
Oh,
But on his way out, he scooped up a whole bunch of documents with him and fucked off because there's like the original documentation. He was put out as a suppressive person, which is considered out in bad standing with the church, and he could be fucked with legally or otherwise, have his life destroyed. A process the church insists that they no longer do, but they probably do. And this came to the court trial or the court case because he was sued for various different reasons by the church. I assume there's a contract involved between him and the church when it came to writing this book, and he broke that contract on top of stealing what was church property, that being the documents. They brought him to church. They brought him to court. The trial lasted for 4 weeks in 1984, and it ended with the discovery of, hilariously, even more lies because the church was using their own evidence to prove that everything that he was saying was wrong, while Armstrong and his attorneys were using the documents that they had, as well as people in the Navy who knew Hubbard, which included a guy named Thomas Moulton.
Witnesses?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So they called Thomas Moulton, who was Hubbard's second in command on the 815.
Yes.
And it was just like, so what was your career like? Did you guys see any hot combat? Or like, were you with him when he got wounded? And he was like, and now Moulton, of course, is like that. None of that ever happened. But also he said that Hubbard had a habit of telling people that he had survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was not even in the Navy at the time. And he had also been the only survivor on his entire destroyer. Yeah.
What?
So he was, not only was he just like a reflexive liar when it came to his own church, like even in his day-to-day life before he was a big shot, like just a fucking lieutenant, he was lying about everything.
Like just the compulsion for him.
Yeah. The church contended that the naval records that Armstrong brought that showed, his real history, which was a normal career with a very normal amount of ribbons and medals that decidedly showed that he was not a combat veteran, were faked. And they had his real paperwork, of which showed, amongst other things, 2 Purple Hearts and like 25 different medals. There's a lot. Most of this doesn't matter to me. We'll talk about one in question that's very funny. For the records,
they easily, like, of the records that the military keeps, which have not always been like very thorough, medals and like just your DD-214 that has been like pretty consistent for a very long time, and just like being something that you can pull publicly.
Yeah, like you can pull ours pretty easily. I mean, they're FOIA'd, so everything gets blacked out. But like for instance, I actually don't have a combat action badge on my DD-214 because I just never submitted it. And like my records have my last name, like my combat action badge is my last name spelled incorrectly. And I think I've joked about that before. I know I've actually posted it to Twitter because someone did FOIA my records once, way back in the day, several years ago when Hooligans first came out, and a lot of people got mad. And someone was insistent that I was lying and none of this ever happened. So they FOIA'd my records and like, look, he doesn't even have a combat action badge, which not everybody has one, even if you've been in combat. It all depends if your commander wants to submit paperwork or not.
I'm missing one. I'm missing an award because I got it awarded to me 3 weeks before I got out of the Navy, and it just didn't like the paperwork wasn't submitted in time.
Right. And like,
like I have it. It was mailed to me after the fact, but no, it's not in my records, and I just don't really give a shit.
Right. And that's kind of why I never submitted mine as well. Like I got awarded it, have the paperwork, and they're like, oh, make sure you submit that for whatever IPERMs or whatever. Yeah. And at that point, I already knew I was getting out. So I was like, why do I care about promotion points? I'm not getting promoted. I'm getting the fuck out. And that's what I did.
It doesn't matter. Like, anyways, it's all just stuff that is so easy to like look up. It has been easy to look up for decades.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're lying, I mean, and it's like it's small shit. It's not like a Bronze Star or a Silver Star or Purple Heart, which are very those are going to be there.
Yeah.
And famously, when this goes to court, you can just be like, so like the thing is, like, you could ask the Navy for records and they will have all of your records, even not the 214 that they'll have that has ever been submitted in your name, even back then. And like that will come up and the Navy's like, here's gonna be fucking purple hearts.
Yeah, right. Well, he like claimed to have been up around Alaska for months too, and that just feels like a really easy one to like poke holes in, since he was never anywhere. Like the closest he got to Alaska was fucking Oregon.
That's not even the first like adventurer thing that he lied about. I mean, he truly saw himself as some revolutionary adventurer. He wanted to be that guy in the 1800s or whatever that found an island and befriended the locals. He wanted to be that so bad. He wanted to
be the white savior so bad, and you never trust somebody who wants to be the white savior.
I'm shocked he never ended up in Hawaii, so he'd get cooked on the shore. But unfortunately. But can Kamehameha take this one out for us? Now, he also submitted records that showed he was, quote, been crippled and blinded.
Right.
Now, the record they submitted was the one that I had quoted from above, which was from the book that Hubbard wrote himself. The one that, he was crippled and blinded and physically disabled permanently. Other notes they submitted as evidence that they claimed were from the military or the hospital were handwritten and clearly in Hubbard's own handwriting. They found a colonel who supported their theory that the military or the government had altered his papers, or what a process he delightfully called sheep dipped for some reason.
What?
Those papers have been sheep dipped. That's
obviously
sure. They pinned down a sheep and just rub the papers all over them. Tracking you, sir. Got it.
To get rid of the static, yeah.
Now, he admitted in court, however, that all of the resources he used to come to that conclusion had been given to him by the church. So, he was paid, probably.
Yeah.
There was no evidence he was a church member, but he is, however, very stupid. So we do have that going for us.
You can always find somebody who's a little bit naive and has a grudge that will say whatever you want.
Yeah, true. Now, adding to the wounded story, in court, this expanded to 2 different wounds, one in the Pacific and one in the Atlantic. Now, the one in the Atlantic isn't very specific, but the one in the Pacific was supposed to have happened off the coast of Java, which is a place he never was. The closest he'd ever... Now, I will say this. He was, in fact, in the Pacific Theater at one point in Australia.
Yeah.
However, we actually, from the date he says he was wounded, we have a medical report that was submitted 4 months after that date. And remember, this wound is supposed to be pretty severe. It was a chest wound. It was supposed to have crippled him. So in 1942, he had pink eye, hemorrhoids, and, quote, urethral discharges.
Gross.
Got the clap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got the clap.
Motherfucker, don't rub your eyes. Wash your damn hands.
Those goddamn Japanese submarines shot me full of VD and shit in my eyes.
It's the only possible solution here.
Now, one thing, the church and him continually bring up the fact that he was blinded. They use the word blinded a lot. He was not
when
blind.
You rubbed a bunch of gonorrhea into your fucking eyeballs.
The poop is mixing with the clap. It's forming a film over my eyeball.
Some sort of like super conjunctivitis.
So let's talk about his eyesight, because he did have bad eyesight. The Navy notes that he had very bad eyesight, and that's actually why when he originally attempted to join the Navy, he was refused from active naval service, and why he ended up in the reserve. And then by the time he was moved over, it didn't fucking matter. World War II happens. We'll give Mr. Magoo a rifle. We don't give a shit.
That makes the Oregon thing that much funnier too. Motherfucker couldn't see shit, and he's out here describing a glassy sea.
Well, the thing is the Navy actually found a revolutionary new way to correct his eyesight using a device known as glasses. Yes. They noted it was corrected to 20/20 using glasses. Now, another bit of evidence from around the war here is pretty funny, and a case of Hubbard lying so often he just can't keep his shit straight. So remember when he spent the entire rest of his career in a hospital? And he crippled and blinded, unable to get up, descriptors that he used. This is a quote from around the war hero. Quote, "There is, of course, nothing in Hubbard's file that would support these claims. In fact, for the man who had supposedly been, quote, physically shot to pieces," which is another term he uses, He seemed to have led a remarkably active life during this time. In two separate statements he made in 1950, in the 1950s, Hubbard claimed that while on leave in Hollywood on July 25th, 1951, he was attacked by three petty officers, one with a broken bottle. However, because of the advanced knowledge of judo, Hubbard was able to fight them off. Yeah, he simply judoed his way out of that fucking problem.
Yeah.
And Ron the War Hero points out, this is a very impressive, if not impossible, for a blinded cripple. End quote. I don't like using that word, but it is used in all of the quotes. I apologize.
I just love the idea. Like, it's obviously made up of three petty officers, just like three E4s, and E5s are so sick of his shit. They track him down.
Attack him with a broken bottle.
Yeah.
Now, the obvious problems with the story being that he's supposed to be bedridden, and he just fucking judo chopped his way out of a fucking three-way bar fight. And two, this happened in 1951. He'd been in the Navy for a fucking year. Who was he taking leave from?
You know.
However, my personal favorite is the forgery that the church submitted for evidence to be his real file that they had in their locked safe or whatever. It claims that he was awarded the, quote, Dutch Victory Medal.
What?
This was not a medal given out for World War II service. It was, however, given out during World War I, and his dad was awarded it.
That's the one he chose from his dad to try to steal?
Yeah, he would have been about 7 years old at the end of World War One.
Fighting to protect a bunch of tulips?
Creating the world's first NFTs. Now, another funny thing here is on that those records, right? The ye old DD-214. Now, all DD-214s are signed by a discharging officer, though I think mine was probably signed by an NCO or something because I was enlisted.
Mm-hmm. Mine was signed by a civilian.
Oh, perfect. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the name used for the discharging officer that was signed on the paperwork simply did not exist.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go.
Which meant that it was pretty obviously a complete forgery. And honestly, the best part about this whole thing is they actually had his real signature, like the actual discharge paperwork.
Right.
They could have just used that name, but they didn't.
They signed so many DD-214s. They're not, like, they don't go over them. They're not going to remember this guy. You could have just used their name.
Well, not to mention, if you use the real name and they do find this guy, say he's still alive, retired, whatever, like, hey, did you sign the discharge paperwork for Lafayette Ronald Hubbard? It's like, yeah.
Yes.
There's a record of that. And like, instead they just like, I don't know, Calvin Smith, USNC or whatever. Yeah, fuck yeah. In case you're wondering, the church lost the shit out of this case.
Unfortunately, that might have been one of the last times they lost a court case.
Oh, there's a better one. We don't normally have positive things to say about the United Kingdom on this podcast, but I will say this, that their courts are very blunt in their rulings, and sometimes it's very funny. So there's another court case about virtually the same thing going on a few weeks later, maybe it was a few months, in the UK's Royal Courts of Justice, and the judge, Justice Lately, put it thusly in his final statement. Quote, that he was a much decorated war hero. He was not. That he commanded a Corvette squadron. He did not. That he was awarded the Purple Heart, a gallantry decoration for those wounded in action. He was not wounded and he was not decorated. That he was crippled and blinded in war and cured himself with Dianetics techniques. He was not crippled, he was not blinded, and he never fought in war.
It's just like running down a checklist and going, nope.
So you might see why if you go to their website now, their details about his war history is significantly trimmed back. And that is the illustrious, incredible military career of Lafayette Ronald Hubbard, Lieutenant Senior Grade.
That is like so much stupider than I expected it to be.
I knew about some of this because like I read Bald-Faced Messiah before.
Yeah.
I heard about his bombing the magnetic deposit or the mineral deposit that was magnetic, whatever. I've heard about the Mexico thing. I had a vague understanding about a lot of the dumb shit. I didn't know about the full breadth of it, and I can honestly say, very happy. I'm very pleased with this.
It sounds like it was a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, right. I am okay. imagine you're that Molten guy that got called in
Oh yeah.
fucking 30 years later or whatever. And he's like, what the fuck did, like, imagine 30 years from now, you're called to testify against some shithead officer that you served with very briefly because they started a fucking cult and started suing people.
That would be so fucking funny. There are so many people I've worked with that, like, if I got called to testify, like, for or against them, I would agree to do it, and I would just shit talk on, like, in
Under
court.
oath.
I would, yeah, under oath, just talk about how much they sucked to work with.
It does sound kind of great, honestly.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, what did Ron do now? Oh,
Yeah,
he
right?
started Scientology. Oh, great. Like, this is before, like, I mean,
fucking confusing.
there's a really good chance that he had no fucking idea what Scientology was because it's the
Yeah.
80s. The internet isn't a thing. You
It was
can't,
pretty, like, localized at first, too, right? Where it was, like, devoted followers, but they were all kind of internal to each other.
I mean, I think it really depended on where this guy lived. Like if you lived in California, because like they were huge in LA. I think they actually still are. You probably fucking heard about them because they did like their Dianetics stress tests as recruitment drives. Not to mention Dianetics blew the fuck up, despite the fact every fucking psychologist on earth called it like this is point. What the fuck are you talking about?
This is like actively harmful.
Which is why the church rapidly pivoted to seeing psychology and like they compare psychologists to Nazis and like death camps and shit.
Yeah, of course.
It's all based on spite.
Talking about your feelings, that's some Nazi shit. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, unless you're doing it in our not ominous looking building at all. So Sarah, we do a segment on this show called Questions from the Legion. And if you'd like to ask a question from Legion, donate to the show. It's like a buck, get access to the Patreon. We have a running post from March. I'll have to make another one where it's like 170 comments now. Fuck. Of different questions, and I'm slowly working my way through them. So this question comes from the Patreon. It says, "What is the best prank you've ever witnessed?"
Okay. So to preface, I was in Intel, which means I only worked with a bunch of loser nerds, and I was a loser nerd. So the best
I was in Intel, but I am a loser nerd.
The best prank that I witnessed wasn't because the prank was good. It's because of how poorly executed it was. Where when I got to TRADOC, a bunch of people who were in the holding department, like holding division, wanted to prank one of our chiefs. But again, losers and nerds. And so what they came up with was just wrapping everything in his office in tinfoil, which like wrapping everything in like plastic wrap or gift wrap is a prank people will do sometimes. But I have no idea why they went with
yeah.
I don't know why they went with tinfoil though. So everything was very shiny, which was pretty funny. But also it was like loud. It was just like crinkly as fuck while they're all like giggling to themselves in this office. And then they're all getting like cut on sharp ass tinfoil. And so they do this for like
the
a
real
whole
prank
day.
is we covered his office in our blood.
I know. He's on leave too. So like they do this while he's on leave. It just looks like shit. And then he gets back and he doesn't do or say anything to react to it. So they went through hours and rolls and rolls of fucking tinfoil. And then he just sort of like crumpled it all up and put it in the garbage and never responded to it.
I think that's the way to go about that because the point of a prank is to get a reaction out of someone.
Oh, yeah. He won.
Yeah, he won that hands down. I think the best prank I ever witnessed, and once upon a time, I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore. There was a video of it. And if I had the video, I couldn't show it anyway because it's just nudity. So I think I wrote about this in Hooligans, but I don't remember. We had a shower trailer on our tiny little outpost that worked, one day out of the week. So we'd all rush in there and get showers. And there was one guy in our unit who was very uncomfortable being around other naked people, which fine, whatever. That's not what the prank is about. But it also meant that we knew he showered late at night and alone. In the shower, it was winter, so like nobody wanted to stay in the shower trailer for very long. So like you effectively just ran a towel over yourself real quick and then ran out to get back to the tent where the heater worked. And two people in my squad climbed to the top of the shower trailer with a fuckload of baby powder because it was like the one thing that we had a ton of because you use baby powder for a lot of shit when you're constantly doing disgusting foot patrols and stuff and barely showering. and they pop the cap on these two giant, like, I don't know, this is enough baby powder to last like years 1 to 4 on a baby's lifespan. Pop the top on both of them, and they waited for him to come out. And his name was Sergeant Blue. I don't know if he listens to the show, but sorry, dude. I actually had no part of it. I only witnessed it because we had these cameras that were meant to, of course, scan the road outside in case we get attacked or whatever, because we're in the middle of a war zone. And we pointed them inward so we could watch because we knew the prank was coming, like responsible soldiers. And I was one of the people watching. Blue walks out, and the guy is just dump fucking baby powder on him. He disappears in a cloud of white, and it's just stuck to him. So he has to, like, he goes back in because he has to take another shower.
He's like covered in sludgy baby powder.
Yeah, it's stuck to him because he's wet. So he goes back in and take yeah, he's probably better than the rest of us. Comes back out, he gets it again.
Oh my God.
And at this point, he just stays naked and starts trying to climb the trailer to get at these guys, assuming that, you know, with the first one, you'd be out of your system. But that's where you'd be wrong, because what the fuck else are we going to do, right?
You had foresight. There was planning involved here.
Yeah, we literally used military resources to prank him. And at this, so he's scrabbling up on this thing naked because he couldn't put on his clothes because they were now covered in baby powder. So he's just going to walk back on a towel. So yeah, it was like a high-speed naked guy chase through the outpost covered in white. No, definitely not. And then the Afghan commandos who are living with us were very confused. Yeah, that was that. I really wish I still had that fucking video, but alas, I do not.
Probably better for him that you don't.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's probably better for him that people don't pour baby powder on him either, but whatever.
Sometimes you've got a lot of baby powder and nothing to do with it, though. Like, whomst among us?
And that's exactly how these bad things happen. Is like nobody disliked him. This wasn't like done out of spite. Like if we hated someone, we wouldn't prank them. We just don't care about them.
Yeah.
But you know, boredom and baby powder equals naked guy covered in baby powder.
But what if it had been powdered lube? You know,
very slippery. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Plug your show.
I have a show. I have a podcast that I put out occasionally called It Came from the Sea, where I talk about ocean science and ocean related topics. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we are also on Twitter at From the Sea Pod.
It's the first podcast done specifically in whale song.
I wish. Maybe one day.
Gotta get
That's
a linguist.
What my degree is going to be in, actually. Yeah.
Whale linguist. Everybody, thank you for listening to the show. If you like what we do here, consider donating to the show, get bonus stuff, or don't. It's your money. Do with it what you want, or leave us a review. That's free, and I don't know why it helps us, but it does, because algorithms are things that exist, if I could say the word correctly. And until next time, lie about your military service and start a sci-fi cult.
Do it.